that's the house rules. Very, very quickly, the Knowledge Quarter is a partnership of over 100 academic, cultural, research, scientific and media organisations located in a 1-mile radius around King's Cross. Together, our partners represent a concentration of knowledge and expertise to rival any in the world. Our partners include UCL, the British Library, Google, Wellcome, RADA, King's Place, and the Francis Crick Institute, as well as local community organisations such as Somers Town Community Association. Amongst our proud partners is Age UK Camden, and we're thrilled to be partnering with them for today's event. Now, for those who don't know, Age UK Camden is an independent charity working in Camden to offer support and services to older people. Together with their supporters, their volunteers, campaigners, and local and national partners, Age UK Camden have achieved a huge amount for older people in 2019-2020 amidst the challenging backdrop of the pandemic. The charity worked with Camden Council and community volunteers to provide emergency support during lockdown, including sourcing, packing and delivering more than 7,000 emergency food parcels and offering telephone counselling, befriending and well-being support. In this event, we're going to get a glimpse of the work of photographer Julian Claxton, whose evocative images tell how staff and volunteers at Age UK Camden stepped up to help the vulnerable across the borough with food parcels and all their other services. We're delighted to be joined by the photographer himself, Julian Claxton, and Age UK Camden's Head of Marketing, Communications and Income Generation, Sasika Amena. I'm going to pass it over to Sas, and before that, I'm going to show a short video. I think that was the plan, wasn't it? Just going to share my screen again with the video. I'll just line it up and get it ready. We've got 2 videos for you today. So there's the first one, and then the second one. Here we go. Here's the first one.
The night has turned your compass into dias. You're hanging like a tightrope in the rain. And now that London told you all its lies, you wonder if...
Please stay at home, do not travel and save lives. Thank you.
Girl, if you're tired,
it felt like we couldn't possibly do nothing.
We can ride England all over again.
It was very early March when we took our first phone call regarding coronavirus and how it was affecting an older resident of Camden, and that was from an 81-year-old gentleman who was blind, very frail, living independently. And he phoned up Age UK Camden in a very distressed state, saying he had no food in the house and he was too frightened to go out, and it was all about what the news had told him and what the messaging at the very early stages was, where it was very much focused on an older generation were going to be the biggest victims to coronavirus. And I think that catapulted a lot of people into this unknown kind of world, if you like, where they'd managed all these years to live independently, and suddenly they were being told you mustn't leave your house, and they were obviously left in a situation they don't have family and friends. Who was going to support them?
When they parade the guns and the blades, we can ride England all over again.
We were able to deliver in some food. I mean, we had no idea how long it was going to go on for, or any idea that this would then result in 4,000 food parcels being given out within a matter of weeks. But yeah, that's where it all started.
All over again, all over again. We can ride England all over again.
Some of the ward councillors were wonderful. They gave resources, money, staff from the local authority, our team, who were working together, and it happened. I think we achieved quite a lot from that.
where faces merge in song and poetry, and plenitude is all that we demand.
We are trying to reach people who we never had contact before. We delivered about 800 food parcels for the Ramadan.
We can ride England all over again. When the parade with the guns and the blades, we can ride England all over.
UK Camden is an organization that truly work for community, wider community. They are an organization. They never shut their door. Even if we can't solve the problem for someone young or something, we try to go extra mile to find where and who can solve it.
Girl, if you're tired, don't go away. We can ride England all over again. When the parade, the guns and the blades.
I look forward to the time where we can stand and be proud. I look forward to that day.
All over again.
That was amazing. Great work there. So I'm going to pass it over to Sasika. And I think, Julian, you're going to share your screen as well. So over to you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sasika Amina, Head of Marketing, Comms and Income Gen, as you said, at UK Camden. I've worked for UK Camden for 12 years now. And as you can all imagine, the last year has been something else completely. As we were sort of reflecting back, and inevitably part of my role has been around capturing how we did it and what we did at the time, I reflect back to our first literary festival that was held on the 6th, Friday the 6th of March. So there was stuff in the news, it was all very vague, all a bit foggy. And in terms of virus prevention, we were going ahead with an event because we weren't told otherwise. And virus prevention involved hand gel and individually wrapped biscuits, which in hindsight is quite amusing. So we got through that. That was our literary festival. That was the last time I saw Julian before he came back to London to help capture what we were doing during the first lockdown. So it was a week beginning the 9th of March where the levels of calls and anxiety from our beneficiaries, it was off the chain, hundreds of calls a day to all of our lines. And I was picking up from, in the States, they were starting to do some sort of community response because there was a lack of food in the food chain. And sadly, I could see it was going that way for us in terms of people were bulk buying. There was panic, levels of hysteria, and many of our beneficiaries, the most vulnerable, weren't able to fathom how they were going to solve the food access solution. So the week beginning of the 9th, Nikki and I and some of the other managers met and we talked about building up resilience packs. We didn't know what that would look like at that time. It evolved rapidly over the next 3 to 5 days. We launched a Twitter campaign that was a shout out to our followers for generous donations of food and funds. We launched a Just Giving campaign at the same time, so we were quite quick to respond in knowing that we were going to have to, inevitably we support, there's over 30,000 over 65s in the borough of Camden. An average year, we support 14,000 of them. The increased level of contact and need was evident, clearly evident. So the initial campaign via Twitter and Just Giving enabled us to start delivering emergency food. And I remember us dropping our first parcel off, and I think it was actually on Friday the 13th. A lot of these dates are sketched in my mind forever. And there was the period between the Friday the 13th and the 23rd of March. We were managing and maintaining and getting parcels out there and responding, closed down our head office, closed our charity shop, closed our 2-day centres, repurposed them into food distribution hubs. I do remember it was around the 23rd, 24th of March 2020, we secured and negotiated a contract with Camden Council to work in partnership. That meant we were scaling up from an average of 200 parcels a week to looking at delivering 600 parcels a week. It left the issue of sourcing food, which was becoming increasingly difficult and challenging. And as we'd scaled up, it was a constant need to replenish both food distribution hubs. And lucky enough, there was a wonderful volunteer who was on furlough from the music industry who was able to step forward, and he drove me around every day, every morning from like 5:30 until about 8. We would be doing the run to 2 or 3 different cash and carries 6 days a week to keep both food hubs replenished with food. We also got a deal with New Covent Garden Fruit and Veg, so we ensured that the food parcels were nutritionally balanced, which was really important, and they offered choice, because it's all about dignity and choice at those times, but while responding to the need. As part of the partnership with the council, lots of their transport and repairs guys were redeployed, and they helped 5 days a week from both hubs with the distribution and the use of Camden's transport. Camden's library teams were also redeployed to support us with the follow-up calls and the level of customer care. So each parcel and each person who received a parcel would get a follow-up call to check how they were doing and look at what other needs they might need. So it sort of puts it into sets the scene that there was the period of panic, people bulk buying, lack of food. We were inundated by amazing members of the community and corporates. And it was May that we finally managed to secure a deal with Sainsbury's, who were able to offer us a wholesale deal on the contents for the parcels, which was amazing and took out a huge chunk of work. But who knew what 20,000 tins of beans looked like? I had no idea. We had no idea, but we did it. We placed the order and we managed to store the items and continue to deliver food parcels throughout lockdown 1. And just to be clear, it was 7,000 referrals, which resulted in 20,000 bags of food delivered. I just need to take a drink, 1 minute. And at the point that we had the deal with Camden Council, central government had also broadened up who they considered vulnerable groups, which meant that we were now supporting families living in food poverty, people with mental health issues who are not within our usual age range. So it was wider than just supporting older people in Camden. It was now supporting all vulnerable people in Camden. Age UK Camden and London Borough of Camden were also able to set up a central referral form, which improved process and access. So luckily Age UK Camden had invested in IT before we went into lockdown, which enabled us to manage that partnership. And I think it's a really excellent example of local authority and third sector working beautifully together to achieve and meet the need. It's really also important to remember that all of Age UK Camden services remained functioning throughout. We've only furloughed 1 member of staff, and that was just for our nail care provision, because that was one service that couldn't continue. As a side note to the level of distress and concern amongst those calling through, we were able to launch and set up our Telefriend service, and that started in around the 3rd week of April. And year to date, we've supported over 260 residents of Camden with continuous support around Telefriends. An example of the impact of Telefriends is a little quick insight. We had one volunteer matched with a beneficiary. That beneficiary had not opened her windows for 6 weeks because she was convinced it was airborne, and she was so terrified she couldn't risk opening her windows. So through building a relationship with our befriending volunteer, one morning she did open her windows and she heard the birds sing for the first time and felt fresh air. And I think that sort of gives a level of insight that many of us may not have had into the level of fear and anxiety amongst the community. What else have I got here? I think I've covered a huge amount of it already, but it's just also just to say that Camden is a huge and diverse borough, and it ranges all the way from Cricklewood to Covent Garden. There's over 30,000 over 65s in the borough, and in an average year we support around 14,000. In the last year we've well exceeded an average year level, so I'd imagine it's around 20,000. I'll be pulling together the latest impact report, so we'll have more detail on that. But we sit within the national body, but we are a standalone and independent charity. So our constant challenge is securing funds and having sustainable services. So we took a huge hit, obviously, as the whole sector has, in terms of income for fundraising. So that's where we were able to move quickly with our initial campaign. But I just wanted to put that in so we're all aware that we're not the national, we are the local, and we're reliant on raising funds via donations, grants and campaigns. And it was in May that Julian joined, and he came to London, and he was able to capture what we were doing on the ground, and it was wonderful to be able to call him up and get him down. And in hindsight, it's amazing. We could get the pictures, because a lot of it is a blur at this point, but the pictures do capture how exhausted we all were and what an amazing teamwork it was with the local authority. I'm just really proud of that partnership, and I'm proud that we could all pull together in such an amazing way. I'll hand over to Julian.
Lovely. Thanks, Sass. Thanks for the wonderful words. Afternoon, everyone. A pleasure to be invited here to chat about a few of the images and tell you kind of a little bit about my experience of coming into it, quite cold and so on and so forth. So I'm just going to share my screen, which hopefully will share. So hopefully you can all see that. Yep, fingers crossed. Good, lovely. Okay, so I'll just do a very brief intro of who I am and so on and so forth after Sass's brilliant intro into the UK Camden's response. So I'm a freelance photographer and storyteller, visual storyteller, although I tend not to use the word visual storyteller since Facebook seems to brand everyone a visual storyteller these days. But that's my job. I shoot people, industry, commercial, offshore wind farms, and so on and so forth. But my passion is for photographing people and telling stories about people. That's what I thrive to do, and that's what I enjoy doing the most. I've been freelance self-employed since about 2018, coming from a medical photography background, and have a great pleasure of working with a cross-section of businesses and charities and individuals, and kind of getting to see things behind the scene, really, and documenting things from, like, with air ambulances, working with them for 18 months, to working in the pandemic with UK Camden, which was as a creative professional that had seen all their contracts and all their work go up in smoke in mid-March, to be asked to come and work with a fabulous charity in central London in strange times was actually one hell of a relief for me. One of the things that I do that I'm really passionate about, that I just briefly wanted to share with you, is I've got a small project called Give a Child a Camera, which I run in Uganda and Rwanda, and I've been running that since 2015. I go out there yearly. Sadly not last year for obvious reasons, but I go out there yearly and I work with street children and kids in rural communities, teaching photography, helping to empower the community and teaching them visual skills, like I say, teaching photography, and they're able to tell stories of their life through imagery, which is really great for me. It's nice to give something back, and obviously the kids benefit as well. And importantly, we have some great fun and great times with it. So if you've got time, feel free to pop along. I'd love to see if you can get in touch. It's like I say, it's all voluntary work, and it's a great little project. So it's giveachildacamera.co.uk. So on to kind of why you're all here, really, on to some of the images. I'm not really terribly used to necessarily chatting about my images unless it's for the Give a Child a Camera. So this is all a little bit bizarre for me, especially without seeing the audience, but hopefully it will just prove a little bit of an interesting insight. So as Sass said, I came down to London for the 6th of March, and I vividly remember pulling into Camden Station, getting off the train, people queuing outside Superdrug, with the kitchen rolls, panic buying, antibacterial wipes, and so on and so forth. And it was quite a crazy scene even then. And I arrived at the beautiful church, the building that UK Camden had secured for their first literary festival, and it was a scene of relaxed heaven, shall we say. Bit of a cliche, but it was a terrific event, very calm, beautiful, lovely insight. And who would have thought within 2 weeks that would be where we were? So as I say, in March, everything kind of went up in the air for me personally. Like I say, I lost contracts, and the creative industry came crashing down. So I was stuck at home, lots of DIY projects, gardening and everything else, and quite enjoying a little bit of a rest, but feeling rather frustrated. And I was keenly watching with eagerness what was happening around the world, but also with partners that I had worked with previously, one being UK Camden. And then the call came in, I guess, kind of probably mid-end of April from, I think it was Saskia or Nikki Morris, the CEO, saying, did I fancy coming down to London, and did I feel safe, and would I sort of put myself in that position? And I just jumped at the chance, and it was a real privilege. And it was a privilege to not only document what was going on from their perspective, but also a privilege to just actually be working and to be doing something I genuinely enjoy, and photographing people that have such an emotion for what they do and such a passion for it. But I'll never forget, I checked into the hotel. The CEO, Nikki, had to send a letter confirming that I was a key worker and that I was allowed to be there. And I checked into this nice little hotel in King's Cross. The chap gave him the keys. He proudly said, "You're the only person staying. I've just come to unlock the building. Here's your keys, I'm off." Showed me where the fire exit was. There was no heating, no hot water, and the TV didn't work much, and the Wi-Fi was hit and miss. So it was a bit of a strange experience, being the only person in the hotel, quite a large hotel. And yeah, it was just odd. The whole situation was odd. On the underground, I was the only person in the carriage. On the train up from Norwich, the only person on the train. And the next day I arrived at Great Croft, and I wondered really what I would be arriving into. You know, was it going to be bedlam, organised chaos, fear, anxiety? What was I going to be faced with? And what I was greeted by was people that were incredibly composed, a little bit stressed, you know, a little bit on the edge, some of them. But I was greeted by a real precise operation. As Saskia had said, they'd already secured the Sainsbury's wholesale deal a few days previous, so they had piles of food. I mean, just unbelievably, how they organised that alone was just quite something. And I sat my gear up in a little coffee room, got a coffee, and was just watching the scene in front of me. And the one of the first images I took was Paul, and this was just so beautiful. He was adamant that he didn't want his photo taken. I mean, many of the staff I'd met, you know, numerous times, and so I was familiar with them. And Paul was a great character, or is a great character, should I say? And I just absolutely enjoyed photographing him, and especially in situ. As I was sitting there having my coffee, the phone was constantly going, and every 30 seconds, every minute or two, Paul would pick the phone up so politely, UK Camden, Great Croft, you know, how can I help? And he would be dealing with people that were in need of food, that were facing anxiety issues and everything. And I just remember sitting there and listening to the way he was dealing, and he was so calm and gracious and forwarding people on, sending emails. And that was the first picture I took, as I said, and it just felt right to take it in his office, where he was seated and on the phone as well. He was adamant he wanted to clean his desk and so on and so forth, but I managed to convince him to leave everything there. And that was kind of really the start of the documentary and sort of people imagery. I I wasn't sure how I was going to actually shoot the images, whether it was just going to be a pure documentary or whether they were going to be more stage portraits, or so on and so forth. I brought some extra lighting with me, which is used in a lot of the portraits, just to add that kind of real harshness, that crisp feeling to the imagery, which is really important to me. But as the imagery developed, I realized that actually for a lot of the imagery that I was taking, I wanted that eye contact, that powerful feeling, and so you could really look into the person's eyes and feel that emotion and everything. So let me move on to my next one, which is Abel. Now I believe he's the manager at Great Croft. A real passionate person. I'm sure several of you in the local community have come across Abel. And yeah, he is such a strong, motivated person, and is really part of the fabric of that centre. And I mean, I've been working with UK Camden for probably about 3 years, just photographing PR events, doing a little bit of portraiture for them. And Abel's always come across as a real strong, passionate individual, and he knows what he wants and when he wants it, and so on and so forth. And it was a privilege again to be able to photograph him and place him in that situation. He was fundamental in the organisation to bring Ramadan parcels and to bring that element into the food parcel chain. And I wanted to photograph him in a relevant area as well. Excuse me while I'm just looking at some notes here as well. His particular kind of passion and the role he played was linking the community, the Bangladeshi community, was really, really important. And I know, I haven't actually checked whether it's okay, but I know that he lost someone really quite close to him through COVID. And I remember saying to him, I sat down before I'd taken the photographs and we were just chatting and so on and so forth. And I said to him, well, don't you feel a bit anxious about coming here every day, putting your, potentially like everyone else there, putting your life on the line? How do you deal with it? But he just said, that's what Age UK Camden do. And I just thought that statement alone was just, so simple, but so strong. And yeah, really strong portrait, and probably one of my favorites of all my time spent there. I just really like his relaxed nature and the situation. So let me go on to one of my onto one of the next ones. This is Brian at Henderson Court. Now Brian is well, let me talk about Henderson Court for those of you that aren't sort of aware. It's a centre that has a lot of day visitors coming in and like sheltered kind of housing. I'm not sure the exact terminology, but they deal a lot with kind of like meal on wheel type situations. And Brian's kind of fundamental in that. And I remember meeting Brian at about 8 a.m. the next day in a busy kitchen area. He was halfway through making his second batch of spaghetti for that day. And as we sat there talking, he was stirring the mince and then boiling and doing a thing, then taking a phone call and everything else. And again, I suppose it's on all of these images, it's the passion that comes through really, more than anything else. But during that time, I managed to spend time with him, learning about him, his passions in life. And I suppose that's one of the great things about my time spent during this pandemic, if there is a really strong point, is that I got to know a lot of the people I photographed really inside and out, which was really, really good. I think probably one of the strongest things with imagery like this is, and in particular where I photographed Brian, there's a couple of photographs of him, but was his interactions with the locals, with the people he was delivering food to. Not only was he dealing with them on the desk or seeing them in the street or as they walked by or walked across the courtyard, because they generally weren't going outside their door, they was kind of walking across the courtyard. He had a great response from everyone and would make the effort with everyone. And I watched him deliver lunch to some of the elderly residents, and this particular elderly resident, I believe, is no longer with us, which is really sad. But I just remember the joy in her face when I was there. I was photographing and filming Brian as he's coming upstairs holding the tray of food, and he just knocked on the door, and kind of it was almost like a ta-da, and ta-da moment, and that joy and that relief on her face was just so beautiful. And it was a real special moment, actually. And obviously he then later cleared, was it okay for me to photograph and film and so on and so forth. But it's moments like that you realise just how great these people are and what they were doing throughout the pandemic. So I'll move on to my fourth image, which is Zuhal. He's probably one of the quietest people I've met, actually. Just beautifully peaceful. Just a really nice, gentle person. I don't think I've ever met someone so gentle. He sat in the conservatory at Greatcroft, working his way through Ramadan parcels, spreadsheets and everything. And while I was photographing and interviewing others, he would be there kind of in the corner, beavering away, and then he'd be up packing parcels, the Ramadan and so on and so forth. Throughout my conversations, I would always get these little snippets of information or these little sound bites that I kind of scribbled down on notepaper or generally later in the evening. And one of the kind of key things that he said to me is it's important we keep Camden fed during this crisis. And again, such a simple statement, but such a poignant statement as well. And I guess this photo really shows the epitome of diversity in the communication, in the community, sorry. And I remember him also saying, which I've got written down here, if we shy away from help, then what is the point in us being here? And again, such a poignant statement. And I just felt photographing him where he was in his makeshift office, really, in the conservatory, surrounded by, as Sass would say, you know, thousands of tins and ghee and everything else was just, you know, really him. Probably one of the funniest people I had the pleasure of spending time with, and kind of a real character, and I use that term kind of loosely, was Ashwin. He was a real talker, a storyteller, and I think I probably got a really good bond with Ashwin, and he loved talking. I mean, I sat in his van as we were delivering around Camden, and honestly, he would not shut up for about 2 hours. It was just absolutely brilliant. I sat there with a mask, glasses steaming up, photographing him, filming him. He was telling me all about his life, his children. Yeah, I learned so much about him. And I photographed him in so many different situations with deliveries and everything. And, you know, he's quite a squat man, but he was so energetic. It's just unbelievable. He would carry these UK Camden bags, these paper bags. Yeah, it felt like miles. I know at the end of the day, he did walk miles. But at the time when I was photographing and filming him, it felt like he was walking miles. This particular composition I absolutely adore. Just love the way he's walking across the courtyard towards the next property, kind of almost oblivious to me. I just ran ahead and just shot a few frames as he walked by. Yeah, and it's just really beautiful. But he was one of the many drivers that was redeployed, as Saskia had said, from Camden Council, and he delivered thousands upon thousands, or was part of the team, sorry, that delivered thousands upon thousands of food parcels. And he was also instrumental, as well as he proudly told me and proudly demonstrated, of providing hot lunch for the staff and the volunteers at UK Camden, which actually is a crucial thing, because most people, you focus on the service you're providing, but actually, you know, it's obviously equally important to feed and water and look after the people that are providing the service. And Ashwin was so important in that as well. And he'd sorted out regular hot lunches from the Catch Social and Cultural Society facility that they'd set up near Wembley Stadium. Like I say, and he was instrumental in that. But one of the things that I guess you can say with all UK Camden staff and volunteers is I just noticed the amount of dignity and care and kind of love that he would do it. When he was delivering the parcels, he would speak to the people and you know, ask how they're doing. You know, he didn't need to do that at all. He could just have dropped it, walked away, got on with the next one. But it was the passion that he had for what he was doing, even though he'd been redeployed and, you know, he didn't have to do this. It was the passion that he was showing. I think that's testament to not only UK Camden, but actually to Camden Council as a wider body, that they've got staff like Ashwin and many others working for them. And you know, quite happy to come into this situation. Probably there's two moments that I really vividly remember, one of which I did film, which you'd have seen on the short film. He was carrying a couple of boxes full of veg tins. I mean, they weighed a fortune. I helped him get one of the boxes out of the van, and then I just sat back and felt a bit guilty as I was filming him. And he walked up about 5 flights of stairs. There was no lift, and this poor bloke was sweating, huffing and puffing, carrying these big boxes. But he'd done it again with such care and dignity. Didn't mind, didn't moan. He just got on with it. He got back to the van, jumped in, right onto the next one. And that was really something. And the last kind of bit that I remember of him is just shortly after this photograph was taken. I just remember someone clapping him, and I don't even know where the claps came from, or the clap came from. Sorry, but it was across a kind of like housing estate, and I just heard a clap, and you know, he didn't mention it. He didn't really say much about it, but you could see that he was incredibly proud. And I think just to be recognised in that small way just meant a lot to him as well. So I'll move on to kind of one of the other images of Nina. This is particularly strong, striking image, the emotion, the power of the feeling in her eyes, the stress. I think the weeks of long days of lugging thousands of tins and everything else that were catching up on people. And this was just caught in a momentary conversation between her and a colleague, just as they were taking away hundreds of bags onto the next van. I first met Nina at a Christmas or AGM event probably a year or two sort of previous. And she was really kind of gentle, lovely person, just going about her work and so on and so forth. But what I witnessed during the pandemic was something, well, equally a lovely person, but so driven, so focused on getting the volunteers who were arriving organised. I'd watch the volunteers come in, and they'd kind of answer to Nina when she was there. She'd direct them to the PPE and kind of almost click her fingers, and they'd be off getting on with something. And that was really interesting to see the change in what I'd seen previously to someone like Nina, to suddenly, I suppose, stepping up, for want of a better phrase, into this role that was still incredibly personable, incredibly friendly, but you know, we're here to do a job. Let's get on with it, and let's do it as quick and as efficiently as we can. One of I remember commenting on one moment. There's another lovely shot of Nina as she's preparing some fruit and veg, and she was putting the apples or pears into this bag, rolling it, and I said, "Cool, you look almost professional." And it turns out she used to work on a fruit and veg stall. I remember her telling me that I think it was a family fruit and veg stall, and she just looked so kind of natural the way she was doing it and everything. And so yeah, it was really beautiful image to capture of Nina and in that setting. I'm kind of whizzing through. I mean, I've only got 2 or 3 more images. I think we're kind of doing relatively okay for time. I'll just do a couple more images. So we're back on Brian here, and this was kind of like a moment of calm, really. Long days, as I said, often not sitting down, deliveries being deployed, phone calls, preparing food, so on and so forth. I just watched Brian. He had just delivered a lunch to a resident at Henderson Court, just eating al fresco in the courtyard, and I watched how he dealt with this, or had a conversation, maybe not dealt, had a conversation with this beautiful lady who was getting the early onset of dementia. And again, just how gentle he was, and the way he dealt with, communicated with her. I got him back in here and just sat him amongst the tins, the thousands of tins, the empty shells. And I thought to myself, in all honesty, after I photographed him here, I just thought the world needs more people like Brian. You know, the world needs more Brians. There's just a lovely manner to him, and something very, very special. So I'll just go through just a couple more, just looking at the time, we're maybe a touch pressed. Just a couple of more of my favourites of Nicole, who was quite a dancer. Apparently, I remember her telling me this, and she would come into Henderson Court. The music would change, the TV would be on, but not MTV, but the music would change. Her and Sonny, one of the other young volunteers, who was about 17, I think, at the time, would put on some drill music, which as a lad from Norfolk, this is a bit alien to me. But yeah, it was an interesting choice of tunes, but the atmosphere changed and a bit more kind of a bit faster paced and everything else. But again, terrific characters and great to see the diversity. And I know it's a term that's used a lot, but the diversity of the group, how they came together and deal with, doesn't matter kind of the ages, but everyone was just coming together, and it's just, yeah, lovely. And back to, again, one of my favourites of Ashwin, I hardly ever saw him sit down. And I think every photograph I've got of him, he's standing up doing something or activity. And this is one of those rare moments where he sat down and ate some hot food. And again, just a beautiful capture and a moment of reflection. The nice thing was I was shooting with a long lens, so he wasn't aware of me. There was no additional lighting or anything else. Yeah, so a nice little special picture of Ashwin. So I think I'll just skip through that one. So that's kind of the end of the whistle-stop tour of some of the images. I hope you've enjoyed it. This is what Sasset UK has put together. So I'll pass over to Sasika now if she wants to say anything at the end.
Thanks, Julian. That was beautiful. Got me a bit emotional. Yeah, so we were able to, this is just one of the examples of a quote in terms of how the beneficiaries experience. And we also hooked up with local schools. So a little cards would go in with the food parcels. Yeah, it was, lots of amazing aspects. I suppose we could stop sharing screen. Oh, it was the call to action. We currently have 2 key campaigns going. One of them is an Amazon IT wish list. So where we are constantly trying to bridge the digital divide in Camden as we support older people to stay connected. And we also have a donate a cuppa campaign. All the links are there, but we can share them afterwards if you'd like. You can stop sharing screen, and we were going to show the other short film.
Yeah, I'm going to show a less than 1 minute video. It's a film. In the meantime, if people have any questions, do put them in the chat. We'll have just time for a couple of questions, but we'll definitely get them in there. So here we go. I'm going to share my screen. And it is that one, I think. There we go, fantastic. That's obviously the Samsung space in Coldrops Yard where the exhibition was running for a couple of months, right?
No, not even a couple of months. When we look back at the year, we just realised we were in and out of lockdown. The regulations were changing constantly. I remember we had this lined up to take place at Samsung, and we were lucky there was a window of around 5 days before we went into lockdown again that we were able to put it on. Yeah. So it was just, when you look back and you think of the various, it was a blessing. It was amazing. Yeah. Also the fact that it was a shop, so you got around a certain loophole, but they were wonderful partners, and it was amazing to be able to bring it to the community and for people to come in.
Yeah, fantastic. So there's a question in the chat. So Sas, maybe you can answer this. Is how was it that you decided to commission the photos? So often the moment passes and only later you realize that you should have done something sooner. Yeah. So how did it happen?
So inevitably these were crazy days, and I remember every evening Nikki, our CEO, and I would have a debrief and just be like, what on earth did we get through today? And And through several weeks, weeks in, we're like, we need to capture this because we can't not. And inevitably, we knew we had Julian. He's our wonderful photographer. We've been making a real push on upping our game in terms of capturing imagery of people, real people in Camden, and real lived experience. So through nightly debriefs with our wonderful CEO, we were like, yes, let's do it. Let's take that jump. Make a small investment and get the pictures.
Yeah. Another person's asked is, do UK Camden work with some of the big food bank organisers like Food for All at Great Russell Street and Nishkam Swat at Lincoln's Inns Field?
So UK Camden, we sit on, and we have sat on now for over 18 months, the Food Poverty Alliance, working with Camden Council and CCG. So that is inevitably, it brings together all the food bank providers in the borough. And we're working on, so we've been instrumental in looking at how the food banks support those that are housebound post-COVID. Also looking at the reality that food poverty was here before Corona, and it's a big problem, social problem that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, absolutely. Julian, over to you. I mean, you must have taken hundreds of pictures. How many were there in total, and how did you select a handful?
Do you know, I honestly don't know how many would say. I think, yeah, although I come from a school of thought. Like when I trained, it was all in film rather than digital. I am really that old. I know I look good for my age, and it was so. I was taught like 36 pictures, 12 pictures, medium format, so on and so forth. So when I shoot, I don't kind of just fire them off. I do tend to be a bit more thoughtful. So, but I suppose there was maybe like a couple of hundred, to be fair. And it was just kind of like natural selection, really. It sounds a bit sort of weird, but I just looked into the eyes of people actually, and was just, and when someone's eyes spoke to me, like Zuhal's, Nina's, etc., those strong kind of moments, those strong eye contact, I knew that was an image, and I just wanted to reflect everyone that was there. I mean, that was just a real small snapshot of the imagery that was captured, but I just wanted to really get to cover everyone was there and tell the story of each individual person, and black and white seemed the perfect way to achieve that kind of rawness just came through.
Absolutely. Another question for you, Julian, is did you build the trust of the people that you were photographing, or did they accept you being around right away?
I think a little bit of mixture of both, really. Normally, certainly if I'm working on kind of a long-term project, or when I'm out in Uganda or Rwanda or doing some travel photography or whatever, I tend to live in the community and immerse myself in that. And it's really important to me to build that trust and build that relationship with people. I think in this occasion, virtually everyone there, and aside from the volunteers, kind of knew me, and I do sort of pride myself on my personal abilities to kind of get on with most people, and so I made a conscious effort to not take photographs when I was first kind of getting to know them for the first few, even just like 20 minutes, just to have a chat with them, get to know them as personally before introducing the camera. I just find if I just storm in there with the camera, people's reactions are totally different, and it's a lot more guarded, and you'll see the photos that people look generally very relaxed and quite comfortable in front of the camera.
Yeah. Are you in touch with any of the people you photographed?
Through Age UK, I certainly am. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Are these photos available online anywhere? Is there any other plans for this exhibition or showing anywhere else, Sass?
Yes, there is. Well, there's hopes for additional exhibitions this year. I'm in conversation with the London Irish Centre as one potential partner. We have them hosted on our website, and they were part of the impact report for 1920. But as I pulled together this impact report for 2020-2021, inevitably they still form a huge part of the narrative and the story. So we will continue to use them.
Yeah. Well, good luck with that, and let us know how the Knowledge Quarter can help you in sharing these stories. It's the power of images to tell stories. It's absolutely profound, and we support you in that. brings us to the end of this event. We wanted to end just before 3 o'clock, so people have time to go and make a cup of tea or something before they have their next appointment. Before anyone leaves, please do leave your comments and your thoughts and your feedback in the chat. I'm going to just share with you our next private view, which is in a few weeks' time. And it has a bit of a theatrical twist. So this time we've got, we're in partnership with the Theatre of Debate, and we've got some actors coming in. So this is another similar community project where stories were collected from the community around miscommunications around COVID, the testing and the vaccinations. And those stories were then rewritten by playwrights and then performed by actors. And there's this wonderful resource now which can be used in schools and communities and everywhere else. So we're going to get a glimpse of that project, how it came about, and we're going to hear a couple of the actors performing some of their monologues. So that's on the 8th of April. So do look at our website to find out more about that. And that brings us to the end. So thank you all for coming. Thank you, Sass, and thank you, Julian, for being in this. And a special thank you to Nikki Morris for all your wonderful work, CEO of UK Camden, and for helping us organize this private view. So really thank you all. And yes, we'll see you again very, very soon. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Your music's working now, Pam.
Came back.
Thank you.
Thanks.